All right, so a question that I get from a lot of people, especially at this time in our world, is how do we deal with divisiveness? How do we deal with two opposing sides that don't really know how to work together, or that are opposing each other, where there's high emotion, deep meaning? Each side is really believes in the meaning that they have, believes they have the truth, they have the right way, and each side has, I guess, they're dug in, maybe they dig their heels in. And, how do I deal with that as a mediator, as a team builder on teams, and in the strategic planning that I do in organizations? And I would say that the first thing that we need to find is a willingness to have a discussion, a willingness to talk about it. That's one thing, because sometimes I've been in situations where you have one side, they're at odds with the other side. They want maybe the business owner to put some sort of the hammer down or create accountability for the other side. And this side, they want the accountability for the other side. And, they're just working like that. And when they're not willing to actually talk to each other, it's hard to bridge that gap or make any headway. In those situations, I have had to come in and actually build a bond with one side and build trust there, and then build it with the other side and build some trust there. When they're not willing to get together, then I've had to get them to actually be willing to talk to the other person based on my request. So I actually went and used the borrowed trust that they've given me to ask them to request, can we have a conversation? And I'll say, I will be there, and we can have this conversation, and it's not going to be like if you're there alone. You're not going to be stuck. You're not going to be powerless, and you're not going to be lost or feel like you're going to get run over. I'll be there as the mediator. I've also went to the other side and used the borrowed trust, the borrowed authority to say, would you be willing to do this? Would you be willing to have this conversation? And when they say yes, then I'm able to get them together. And when I get them together, I'm looking for a few things. Number one, I want to find out each side what's their, we'll call it their highest hope, or what's their ideal outcome. If they could have the best thing, if I could wave a magic wand and they get it, which isn't reality, but I have to ask them to think big, to dream a bit, or to find out what their highest hope is. And when I ask them what their highest hope is, then we're able to get them to think about what they really want. If we can get them to think about what they really want, and they can articulate it, or they can write it down, then that's another step. I know I've made another step. Now, what I'm always looking for is any shared interest, any shared desire. Because when there has been division, when there has been unfair treatment, some level of maybe perceived injustice, then that's a lot of times all either side can see. If I can find a shared interest at any level, a shared desire, then I'll start to work with that shared desire. And it might be the smallest thing. Maybe, again, I'm usually working in organizations doing this. So they have a shared interest in maybe developing the organization's success, or at least they believe they want that. So I'll work with that so that there's that shared interest. Once we have that shared interest, or at least I know what it is, I'll also then begin to do what I call climb the mountain, to reach the summit. And here's how I describe the mountain in order to reach the summit. You have one group on one side, or one person on one side. You have one group on another side. And in between them is this large mountain. And the time that I take with them actually allows me to understand them, understand their interests, understand their their desires, their highest hope, and I try to get to the peak of that mountain, and I can look down on one side, I can look down on the other side, and it's my goal to help kind of launch a couple of ropes down and help pull them up. But by the time they reach the summit of that mountain, they actually can see each other. They can see each other as people. They can see each other as human beings with needs and desires and challenges just like they have personally. Instead of what oftentimes happens when we have something which I learned from the Arbinger Institute as the heart of war. When they have a heart of war, they actually see each other as objects. In an object, you either use an object to get what you want, or an object is actually an obstacle to you. So our goal is to get to the summit of the mountain. Now, how do we get to the summit of the mountain? Again, you have to get them in the room. Secondly, I find out their highest hope, their desire, their highest desire, and I'm looking for that shared interest or that shared desire. Now, at that point, I actually then find out what the issues are. What created the impasse? What's the injustice? What's the problem? And begin to mine out the problems, mine out the injustices. What's been unfair about this? Where's the inequity? And so we will look and begin to find that, and I'll begin to put the issues out on the table. So we put the issues out on the table. And now we know what the issues are out. Now it's important that at one point they've declared their highest hope or their deepest desire. But now it's very important that they begin to state their issues. And my role in that situation as a mediator or as a negotiator is to actually hear them. If they can have their issues heard, that is absolutely huge. They have to have their issues heard. They have to know somebody hears their issues and feels what they are experiencing. Somehow connects with that issue that they're explaining instead of minimizing it or dismissing it or avoiding it, which is often what has happened to this point. So the issues are there because they haven't been yet heard. So we have to hear the issues. Now, oftentimes I'll even try to prepare the other group to hear the issue, the other side to hear the issue. If the other side can hear the issue and actually restate that issue, now we're really getting far. Okay? So now let's say this side has the issue and this side is able to hear it and restate it. They don't have to agree with it. They don't have to understand it fully. They do have to be able to hear it and articulate it to this side's satisfaction. So this side has to be satisfied that this group actually has heard it and can articulate it. Now, once that happens, that issue now has the potential to be resolved. Same with this side. If this side has an issue, there's mistrust, there's a perceived unfairness, and they're able to state the issue, and this side can articulate it or can actually state it back, give some feedback and basically summarize it or somehow state that they understand it to this side's satisfaction, now that issue can move forward. So we're going from bottom of the mountain, looking at the highest hope at the top, which is on the summit, and now we're working at the issues. Once we have the issues out on the table, we'll begin to brainstorm options. Brainstorming options means, what are some options to resolve this thing? Now, how do we find those options? Really, what happens is people are stuck in their positions often. In the book Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher and William Ury, they talk about this, positional bargaining and positional negotiation. And it usually doesn't work because underneath the position are different interests, underlying desires, things that they want. So what I'll do then is look for the interests. What are the underlying interests? If we can begin to find those underlying interests, now we've gone to the next level where now we actually are finding, okay, they've stated their interests and now this side's stating their interests and now I'm again fishing for shared interests. So let's say that this person's stuck in a position, this person's stuck in a position, but we found one shared interest. And I'll say, well, if we can get you that interest and you that interest, would that be helpful? And if it's a yes, we move another step up the mountain. They're getting closer to that summit. When they get closer to the summit, they're getting closer together. So now we're looking, what's that interest? What is your interest? When we find those underlying interests, we begin to mold shared interests. Now, hopefully we can come to what Stephen Covey calls synergy. Synergy is where we can actually come to a greater outcome than maybe we even knew we could coming into this. Because the shared ideas, the brainstorm, the creativity can actually bring forth something more than we ever knew was possible. It's where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So now we're looking at those interests, and once we've found some shared interests, those are options for agreement. Now, if we can get those options for agreement, and this side can get enough of their interests met, and this side can get enough of their interests met, because we've identified the shared interests, they can move off their positions, off the gridlock that has been there, and begin to move into agreement. And the agreement might not be anything that they thought they were going to find coming into this. Their positions are now moved. They're able to find their interests that are deep and underlying and real are shared. So this is not compromise. It's not that they just decide to compromise. No, they're actually getting what they want. It's just the fact that they've found their deeper interests. They know what they want in a more pure way. They're actually mining within to know what they want in a more pure way, and they're finding what they want in a way they never found before. So now we're able to find those interests, create an agreement, and begin to work mutually. When we create the agreement, they're at the summit of the mountain. They actually can see each other. When they've really heard the other person's issues, when they've really heard the other person's then interests, they're actually beginning to see each other as people. They're actually be able to see each other with the same challenges, needs, hopes, and desires that they have. And there's a sense of a oneness that can come about there. There's a sense of an understanding that we are together in this. We are really in this together. And so now we get an agreement. Now, to follow up, we might want to say, how are we going to create some accountability, or how are we going to check in to make sure this agreement is lasting? Another thing we have to maybe do is make sure that once we have an agreement, we check with the people that are involved in their life or in their work world, the other stakeholders, to say, does that agreement work with the other people that are invested in you, the other stakeholders? Because if not, that agreement can just fray once they get back and they're talking to somebody that starts to talk about, that was a horrible agreement, why did you do that? So we have to make sure that the stakeholders have some level of buy-in. When we've assured that, we create the agreement, and hopefully now these people are seeing each other as people. Their interests are being met. There's some synergy there, and there's energy to move forward. There's energy to move forward with delight, with some joy, and now we are looking for that follow-up and that continuity in building traction. So I'm Tim Figley. I'm a mediator, a strategic planning facilitator, a team builder, leadership development coach, and I'm just here to tell you, check out my other videos if you like this one. That's a little idea of mediation that you can use in your world, on your teams, so that you can operate more as a cohesive team and as a high-performance team. Thank you.